All right, go ahead. Welcome again to By the Father. Only one of us here, two of us here. So we have a couple, maybe a few questions. So go ahead and shoot.
Yeah, so as part of the Acts Retreat, I am giving a talk on values. And so I spent a lot of time writing about my faith journey and my faith values. But one of the goals is to pull in, um, you know, uh, passages from the Bible and any kind of um, faith-based learnings, right? So it kind of got me to thinking, and I wanted to get your input on one, any passages that you like related to values that you can think of, and then two, what I noticed in writing my own story is that when you're born, your values are based on your immediate environment, your family, but then as you grow up and you have more life experiences and you continue on your faith journey, your values can change. And also things happening I feel like even things happening in the world, I guess you have a core base of values that would never change, but I think there's an opportunity for them to grow. And sometimes you focus more on certain values than other based on your life or the world. Like, I don't know what you think about that, but I've been pondering it since I've been writing my talk.
Yeah, no, I think it's so the question, just in case, like I said, I got the Omni mic, but I don't know if it can be. We're all using my computer speaker today, so I don't know if we can hear it. But the question, basically, if I can maybe just maybe sum up or reiterate, right? So what the question is about values, and so I guess maybe more particular, so values sometimes are very subjective. Are there objective values that we really hold dear that are eternal? Are there always that always endure? Um, as we grow as individuals, how does that does those change for us? Um, our priorities may be associated with that. And maybe to start answering that question, I mean, there's some depth involved with that. I think the first thing we need to do is understand what is a value. So when we look at like Catholic teaching and what the church teaches about when it comes to how we should live our lives, right? There are moral certainties that we have to hold true, that we would value those. But there's also a level of discernment involved when it comes to other goods, and there's a process that we call discernment, which helps us understand maybe what God wants for us. So I think values is sort of a very all-encompassing term, but sometimes we might use synonyms for values such as priorities, maybe such as virtue. Um, but I think we have to make a distinction there between there are objective moral values that we have to actually hold dear and would uphold and have to follow. But does that mean that there's also maybe subjective values? And I think there's some truth there. So, for instance, maybe to make a distinction between these two, um, it would be a value for me as a parent to instill truth and virtue into my children, right? That's a value that we should all really have, that's sort of universal for all parents. Um, how do I do that though? What maybe might the best way for that to be for me and for my child to actually learn those things? Well, that can be rather subjective depending on how the person may receive those, or maybe the best talents or gifts you have in giving those. Both are valued, but there's kind of a difference um, between the value of the objective truth I'm trying to portray and the value of how I actually do that. Maybe to make it even more distinct, there's a value in not robbing my neighbor because I want to be treated the way I want to treat others the way I want to be treated. And so if I don't want myself to be robbed, I would not rob my neighbor because that would be wrong, right? And that would be a value that we hold. That might be different than, well, you know what? I have to provide food and sustenance for my family, and I have to get a job. I have to follow a career. And so I could go work at the local McDonald's and make money to provide for my family, or I can maybe work, get a degree and become a banker or a lawyer or a doctor or whatever it may be, and provide for my family that way, but also achieve something that is really have to feel called to do. So I say that because those are two different types of values that we have to really kind of make distinctions with. One is kind of my calling in life, and the other one is a set of moral principles and values that everyone really should hold dear because of the universal truths associated with those. So I guess maybe that's a good starting point. Does that make sense? Or does that answer at least
Yes.
part of the question, maybe?
It does. Yeah, it does. And then so yeah, so that's a much better way to look at it than values have changed over time. There's different, yeah, okay.
Right.
But
And
then
that
I
may be
was also,
true. So what I would say, instead of values change, you could say priorities change. I mean, because obviously, when you were a single woman, Lisa, you probably had different values than you are as a mom today, right? Or different
right.
priorities, I should say.
Or like DEI was a really good one, right? Like that has maybe been an issue throughout my lifetime, but it's never been more prevalent as it is today. Diversity, equity, and inclusion.
Well, there's a maybe debate on that, but it
Yeah.
definitely is the forefront maybe of in a lot of people's minds. It's probably been there's probably more of an emphasis on it today than there have been maybe in the past. Um,
Right.
so yeah, so I think that what we're talking about there really is more a set of priorities rather than a value,
Mm-hmm.
right? And so we would still say, even when it comes to maybe DE and I, that there's a value in treating others with dignity and respect,
Mm-hmm.
right? Because we recognize in someone that an image and likeness of God that's involved with every human person. And so we should always, as Christians, as Catholics, uphold that dignity of the human person, regardless of what we look like or what advantages or disadvantages we have, or what kind of physical abilities we have. There's inherent value in every living human person. Now, we hold that as a moral principle that everyone should hold that, because that goes back to the golden rule: treat others the way you want to be treated. Now, how do we implement that though? Right? So, okay, well, there's maybe different priorities in how to do that. So one could argue, yeah, it's very important to do that, but also we as a society tend to devalue human beings in the fact that we have things like euthanasia and abortion. And wouldn't it make logical sense to say, so let's deal with that issue first before we actually move into these other issues, because that seems more principled, more primary to these other things. One cannot have dignity if they don't have life, right? That's more of a potential judgment, right? When it comes to those things, morally speaking, there's equal value in life and in dignity, but in the way we live our lives, and a prudent judgment of what should be more, I don't know, maybe more of a principle, or more of a priority. Well, it seems like life should be the most fundamental priority, because we can't have these other things without that life, right? So I think that's where we have to look at when we're talking about these things is, yeah, we hold, morally speaking, there's no real hierarchy involved when it comes to the morality of something. Morality is there's always for the purpose of good, and because of that, it's just as wrong to demean somebody in their dignity as it would be to take someone else's life. Morally speaking, it's the same problem. As long as you know it's wrong regardless. But one is probably a higher priority of the other, because that one is more fundamental to our human existence.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's always important to keep those in mind. And when we talk about these things called we say values, I think we probably would want to use priorities, because values could also be considered like virtue, right? Everyone should strive to grow in virtue. And those are valuable, right? You could even say, but you could also say in the same sentence that even though I want to grow in virtue, I also want to maybe grow in my bank accounts, right? And grow in money and power, and maybe fame, or maybe in like my notoriety. Those aren't necessarily bad in themselves, but if they become your highest priority, they can lead you astray from what the universal truths and what the goods of God really truly are.
So in some of the research that I was doing, there was, in no particular order, and this isn't all encompassing, but there were 12 quote unquote values that uh, of Jesus, which were life, love, peace, truth, faith, righteousness, service, sacrifice, gratitude, respect, courage, hope. So does it make sense to say those are more virtues than values? Because I mean, how do you even, if you don't prioritize, how do you work on everything at one time?
Yeah. Well, we understand. So again, I think we have to make a distinction between virtue and value, because you could value fame, right? But that's not necessarily a virtuous thing to do. Virtuous are what we consider to be the highest goods, right? Because there's a synonymous attribute of virtue with God. That when we look at a virtue, we all have like differing degrees of those virtues that we experience in our lives. We have potential for perfect virtue, but the actuality of us actually living those perfect virtues is improbable, right? There's only two people that have lived those virtues perfectly, all the virtues perfectly. That was Jesus himself, and of course the Blessed Mother. The rest of us, we tend to fall short in these things. So I don't know if you limit Jesus' values just to 12 things. I think those are probably those may be emphasized in some way by particular people. And I don't know what research you really got that from. We understand in our Catholic faith, when it comes to virtue, that there are 7 kind of principal virtues: faith, hope, love, the theological virtues, and maybe just beneath those would be prudence, justice, temperance, and fortitude. Those we call the cardinal virtues. And all the other virtues tend to categorize underneath those 7. Now, virtues, though, are something, they're habits that we train ourselves to grow in, right? And God gives us opportunities to grow in those virtues. We also understand from a Catholic perspective that as one virtue grows, the others grow as well, right? Now, there still may be a difference between the way we grow, let's say, in faith, and maybe the way we grow in prudence. But if we're growing in faith, we're growing in prudence. But we may grow in faith at a higher rate than we are in prudence, okay? And that's okay. Those virtues still grow regardless. But that would be different than things like the gifts of the Holy Spirit. Or that would be different than like maybe the fruits of the Holy Spirit. And traditionally we recognize 7 gifts of the Holy Spirit and then 12 fruits. Now, would those be synonymous with virtue? Well, there's a correlation, right? Either way, they're both habits, but the gifts are freely given to us by the Holy Spirit, while the fruits are the effects of those gifts that come from the Holy Spirit. And we could look at maybe as virtue as the means of providing those effects, right? And that seems maybe a little bit more scientific, maybe a little bit more systematic. But that's how we kind of understand the interaction between those things. So if you use a virtue, if you use like the 7 virtues and say, well, okay, wisdom. Yeah, wisdom would be considered a virtue too. And that would probably fall under the jurisdiction of prudence. Same thing with knowledge and understanding, or even good counsel, right? Good counsel may even fall underneath justice. Piety, well, that would actually be an act of justice too. That we're giving God what's due to God, right? Namely, our worship. Wonder and awe, well, that would be probably could fall underneath hope, right? That we hope to actually achieve that goal of wonder and awe in the heavenly kingdom. So there is a connection between all these things, but there are some distinctions as well. So when you say those 12, I would kind of maybe say, well, okay, yeah, for sure, Jesus kind of had those values, those principles, but I don't think you limited just those 12 either, right? So because he's God, he would have all those virtues and be the epitome and the source and the summit of all those virtues. But it's actually funny that Jesus actually didn't have one virtue. And there's a good reason for it. We would say as Catholics, that Jesus did not have faith. And the reason that Jesus did not have faith is because, well, he knew that God existed because he was God, right? He saw God. He saw the God the Father face to face. He saw the Holy Spirit. He experienced them in a very intimate way that we as humans, we need faith to actually give us that understanding, that goal, right? Because we can't see God face to face right now because of the limitedness of limited bodies that we have. But Jesus, because he was God, didn't have faith because, well, he knew. For sure. Yeah. So yeah, does that kind of help a little bit?
Yeah, definitely. I'm probably gonna have to go back and re-listen to this a few times. Are there any passages you can think of, interesting or good passages related to values in the Bible?
Yeah, well, I mean, if we want to go from the moral standpoint, obviously Exodus 20 would be that's where we get the Decalogue, the Ten Commandments, and then I think if you look at Matthew 5, which is the Beatitudes, I think those are definitely very fundamental when it comes to value, especially in the moral life. When it comes to maybe levels of discernment, it's interesting. I think right now we're reading kind of through in the Mass, John's Gospel, especially we call the Last Supper discourses. And right now we're actually on John 17, and in John 17 we call that the high priestly prayer of Jesus, where Jesus prays for us all to be one. And even that kind of leads into what Thomas Aquinas would call the transcendentals. And there are classically 5 we call transcendental gifts. These are things that kind of are the foundation for all existence. One is goodness. The second one would be being, existence itself, being. Third would be harmony. Fourth would be unity. Goodness, now I'm trying to go through them now in my head. Thomas Aquinas kind of puts these out there a little bit better. Unity, harmony, oneness. I'm sorry, goodness, existence itself, and now I'm forgetting the 5th one. So, but Thomas actually added the 6th, what he would call beauty, and that we would also say those are valuable, probably in the highest sense. But in John 17, I should go back to John 17. He's praying for that unification of all, that we all be one, right? And there's a lot of beauty in that, and I think there's a lot of kind of the existence of our virtue or value, and especially bringing that transcendental aspect of unity, which Jesus and which God is, and also what Jesus wants for his church. So that might be a good one to read through, just John chapter 17. There's some various passages. Some of that gets very deep though. And so it's kind of, it's kind of hard maybe to distinguish where Jesus is going in there. But primarily that's kind of the main goal, is that there's unification of his church, that the church be one with Jesus, and Jesus and God the Father are one in themselves. So that might be pretty good too.
Good.
Does that work?
Yeah, that's great. That's great. I'll have to, like I said, re-listen to that and then rethink some of my talk. What about is there anything been published from the church on the church's thinking on the Roe v. Wade issue?
You mean like recently?
Yeah, yeah,
Well,
recently.
yeah. I mean, one thing when we talk about the issue of abortion,
I think it's interesting that if they're putting it at the state level and the states are going to decide when it's okay, when it's not, I feel like that's wouldn't be in alignment with the church.
Actually, quite the opposite. What the church would say is, well, obviously, because of the moral issue with abortion, it's not a political issue; it's a moral issue. They would say that the taking of innocent life, regardless, would be intrinsically evil, right? So abortion at all would be wrong. Now to qualify that, there are situations church would teach where there could be justification in abortion, but in those situations, in those circumstances, the abortion can't be willfully done. So a classic example that would be if, let's say, you have a woman who is pregnant and she finds out she has uterine cancer, right? and they have to operate immediately to get the cancer out, and that would also mean that the child would be terminated. Well, that could be justified to do, and the woman could actually do that, provided that it's not a direct intentional taking of that life. So in other words, the operation itself is actually cure the cancer. A secondary effect from that, though, would be there's potential for the life of the child to be terminated. And so in those instances, the church say, yeah, because the direct action is not to kill, it's to heal, you would be morally justified in doing that, performing that surgery in those aspects. So just want to make that clear. But the earliest teaching of these things actually comes back from not only the Old Testament, but also the teachings of the 12 apostles we call the Didache, which actually roots back to the 1st century or 2nd century. And these were kind of written down teachings of the church that have kind of been around for centuries now. So, but recently there's been a lot of talk about more Catholic politicians and their role, right? So what the Catechism says specifically is it holds what Jesus taught. It holds the principles of life as fundamental. It holds the Didache as moral authority coming from the apostles. But it also says in there that when it comes to Catholic politicians, the role of a Catholic politician is at least not make it worse, right? So in other words, if there are laws in the books that you had no hand in, and you're coming into an office, your job is to abstain, or you just be quiet about the issue at the minimum, right? And that's why you see recently there's been a lot of talk, especially with people in high-profile areas, about receptions of communion, right? Especially with Eucharist, that people who are not upholding these ideals that are taught specifically in the Catechism, there has to be some repercussion. And I think it's important to point out too that it's not these bishops just like out of the blue saying we're going to start doing this now. With one instance particularly we just heard recently, there was dialogue involved. There was always an open channel, and that dialogue was rejected, and that channel was closed by the other side. And so, for the good of someone's soul, the bishops are saying we have to do. It says very specifically in the Bible that if you take the Eucharist and you're not in state of in union with the church, it's to your own destruction. So it's better for that person's soul that they actually be corrected in these aspects before they actually receive the Eucharist and bring more scandal to people around them, right? So that's kind of where the focus has really been recently, I think. With Dobbs v. Jackson coming out very soon, the churches uphold that, yeah, we want that this to be upheld because of the intrinsic evil that is abortion. And in some ways, the church will uphold that yeah, it really should be down to the lowest level of government. We call that the rule of subsidiarity, right? The church has always followed rules of what we call subsidiarity, but also of solidarity. Right. So in other words, we're all one in our direction and principle. We all want to go the same direction. But when it comes to actual practical government, that should be done at the lowest level. Right. And subsidiarity would dictate that if there's a problem with the lowest level, well, the highest level can come in and help. But the role of that higher level is to get everything where it needs to be and then step away.
So what if those lower levels, some states are much more liberal than others?
Well, the church will still uphold that in those states where it's so loud. That's so wrong. And we should do everything we can to try and overturn those and move towards that. But I think the advantage that we're seeing here from a bigger macro standpoint is there's a lot of states out there already have laws in the books that are going to make it illegal. And so in reality, you're kind of actually making it less be right. There's actually a better moral issue going on with this aspect than would be before. Right. So that's kind of where we're at when it comes to that. And that's been the teaching of the church for really generations. The government should really be at the lowest level. And yeah, you could say, well, yeah, okay, but you have these lower level governments that are actually not making moral decisions. Yeah, well, that's going to happen. We should work to maybe try to help understand, to reach out, to work with people, especially who are going through these experiences, as in ones of pregnancies, help them, provide for them, give them options so they can actually raise their children. Yeah, we're all for that. There's nothing wrong with doing that at all. As a matter of fact, the church would say that that's what our main goal should be in these things, regardless of what the law says. But I think in this respect, the circumstance of this would be better that it actually Roe v. Wade is overturned, because then that gives the freedom of the states to actually make laws that actually are in line with moral teaching as well, uphold the common good. Yeah. Good.
Any progress with practice that you know of?
As far as what?
Just better, being more involved.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, I know there. I mean, the school I know gets more involved with that than I think the parish macro level. Part of that I think is because as we're coming out of COVID, there's been more also a lot of focus really what's going on internally in the parish too. I don't know if we just gotten around to doing that. So getting more involved with them. I know in the past, I think there's actually been kind of sharing of like the congregations, like, you know, we would go up there, they'd come down here.
Right.
I don't know if there's really been much discussion about that, but also all things new might raise a kind of be a catalyst for that possibly. Part of that though, when it comes to all things new, is there's kind of a focus on the parish, then on the planning area. The planning areas also are not necessarily bound by the different deaneries. Like for instance, our planning area actually goes into the county. So everything kind of west of Kings Highway, south of 40, and then all the way down out to about the end of Webster Groves is kind of our planning area. And then everything east of the Mississippi, or east of Kings Highway, south of 40 is kind of a different planning area. So there's kind of more folks that they kind of did that based on demographic, kind of, you know, there's more factors kind of go into that. South City is a kind of difficult one because, boy, each neighborhood is almost like a microcosm of different aspects. So I think here it's more difficult to do in this particular deanery. But North City has their own planning area. So there's been more emphasis maybe stick within our planning areas, kind of develop this as we go. But there's nothing saying we can't go out of the planning area too, to kind of, you know, engage and grow. So yeah, this might be a catalyst to do that.
There is an informal group. They have St. Matthew's has a webinar once a month where someone will share an article or a video, and there's an informal group that needs to talk about that, their neighborhood, and then we grow folks here in our neighborhood. So we've talked about putting mass up there.
Oh, great.
Lunch, but I don't know if, you know, is it better that it just grows informally, or should we, you know, start to say in the bulletin,
Yeah.
hey, there's this webinar,
Well,
hey, we're going to mass.
Yeah. Here's the thing. I always want my usual default is I want to do everything under the auspices of the pastor. Right. So in other words, I think it's good that there's an organic growth within
Yeah, there's
people.
something to be said for
Sure,
organic growth,
exactly.
too.
But also the pastor should at least know about it. Right. So I think that's always a good thing to do, to include the pastor, because also the pastor may have some resources and outlets and things that we can do.
So AKA Monsignor.
Yeah. Just so that it makes it a little more unified, right? And also provide that kind of outlet for like communications and, you know, whatever. So I think there's a both and aspect of that. So it's good that the lady are taking upon themselves to grow that. Wonderful. But also we want to get the pastor involved in some way, or at least let him know about it, so that when things happen, like part of that's also too, like in case it goes wrong or something happens,
Yeah.
he's not in the dark.
Well, it's interesting because theirs is not involved in this today.
Right.
It was really just parishioners getting.
Yeah, that's fine. Yeah.
But I think to really grow that.
I think that's the key. Because I mean, especially if we want to start advertising using like parish resources,
Right.
that would be something the pastor has to be involved with. Yeah. For sure.
And a lot of the things, like when we ask them, like, how do we get involved? How can we help? A lot of their things are, they've planned far in advance, you know. So like the first thing we learned about was at Christmas, and it was like, I don't even know how to message that to our entire parish, because they were donating toys for kids and there were ages and there was this mix and
Oh,
match
sure, yeah.
options. And it was like, I don't even know how to write this for the bulletin to make it easy.
Well, we've had for a while now the giving tree, which is kind of that aspect. What it is, you get an ornament that says it has a gift on it for someone, a boy, let's say age 6, who here's his sizes for and here's what he wants, right? So that would be done through like the Giving Tree Passer for like Christmas. Now I know we've been doing that. I don't know where those things
Where it
go.
goes, yeah. It's
Um,
interesting because they have a whole day in this house where a family registers, they come, each kid gets one gift based on their gender and age.
okay.
They had the COVID vaccine, there were clothes, they have a bath, each one gets a basket full of, you know, like laundry detergent and dish detergent and paper towels and, you know, basic,
Sure.
like, how,
Yeah.
so they, you know, they really come and it's kind of a whole day and they get, I think they even, you
Yeah,
know, so
great.
they get a free meal, so
Sure.
it's like a whole day.
Yeah.
for
Well, I
them.
think part of that, I mean, one thing too is the bulletin article, you can maybe condense that in some way, saying, you know, there may be, I don't know how do they advertise it? They advertise like a family day or something. Yeah, right. So that might
We
be
said,
one.
we're like, I think we can help more if we
Right.
could like simplify, like,
Sure.
I need 100 paper towels, I need, or.
I would
don't
even, I
know.
mean, that could be as simple as just maybe talking to our Giving Tree people and say, can we have half the stuff go towards St. Matthew?
Who's that?
Boy, now you're putting me on the spot. I think it was, let's see, I think it's changed hands recently too. I gotta find that out.
Okay.
So I think it was Fran Boyer, but also I think there's some other people involved with it now too. So it's, I know we didn't have it, I think I think we had it this past year. Did we have it this past year? I don't know if we had it for a while. I think my first year we had it, and then there's COVID.
Maybe
Was
COVID
you're
was
right,
too hot.
right. So I don't know if it's been picked back up again, but maybe that's something that we could pick back up.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I know they've been doing. They used to do random or like planned gatherings and like kind of donations for that. I know we have bins in the back of the church for St. Matthew for those kind of things, like toiletries, whatever.
Yeah.
So those could come back. I
Yeah.
don't see why they couldn't happen. I think
We've
all it
done the
takes is.
backpack stuff. We've been
That was-
starting
yeah, that
school
was
for
right,
like 3,
right.
4 years now. We've
Yeah.
done that.
So I think that's definitely something that we could I think part of that just taking the initiative of someone actually spearheading it. Again, under the guise of the pastor, but someone just taking that on and doing it.
So what's the process to reach out to him on that? You just
I
email or
just
just
talk to them.
passing after mass? You see
Well,
him, or-
And this is for anyone watching. Monsignor Shamla, from what I've learned living with him for the last 3 years, is the best way to communicate him is face to face. Right. So before mass, after mass.
I hate to like catch him. Like, what if he has to go right after mass? And here I roped him into this long conversation. Or
I would. So what you also could do is say, hey, when you approach him, it's like, I know this might take a little while. Let's plan to meet.
and then
right.
if he wants to do it there, he'll say just
Right. Exactly. So you can call him, you can email him.
Yeah.
Sure. There's never a guarantee he's going to get back to you.
Yeah.
And
He's
I
always
just
replied. It's just,
Yeah.
I think he's
right.
takes
Right. Yes. And right. Yes. Exactly. So if you need an answer right away, the best thing to do with him
Okay.
is face to face.
All right.
So yeah. So I would probably approach it that way.
Good.
So as long as someone takes initiative, I think he'd be fine with it. 'Cause I think it's
Awesome.
always a good, but it's just a question like, what do you need? His question may just be, what do you need from me? What do you need from us?
He's not gonna say, "Oh, here comes Aaron and Lisa." Oh, that was
I don't think he would say that. But I think the question we have is, what can we do for you? How can we
Yeah.
help?
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, I have to head over to Addicts. I don't know if you want. There's still time to register if anybody watches this between now and any women listening between now and Saturday.
So,
there's
right, we
still
have-
space.
We have an axe retreat coming up for our ladies this weekend. Starts on Thursday, goes through Sunday morning. It's at LaSalle Retreat Center out in Wildwood. The applications are online or also in the bulletin. It's still open for anybody. So if you want to come, you're more than welcome. It don't have to be Catholic either. So if you're just watching this randomly and you want to come, contact us and fill out a form, and it'll be open for you. So
We have 12 to 14 retreatants right now.
that was a good
so-
number. I was happy to see
Yeah,
that.
it's
That was good. Yeah. So
And a lot
so yeah,
of young folks now.
Yeah.
A lot of
So-
young folks.
there you go. If you want to join, please feel free.
Awesome.
Otherwise, we'll see you guys next week for Friends, Food, and Faith. I haven't decided a topic yet, but we'll decide on something, I'm sure. So God bless. Have a great night.